the state of the nation. Some measure of progress has been made within the first 31 months of this administration. However, as was the case with previous administrations, the current government appears to be merely patching the cracks on the wall. This administration anchored its policy outlook on three main thrusts. 1, security. 2, job creation through diversification. And 3, anti-corruption. Yet, all around us are signs of retrogression. As of June 2015, the unemployment rate was 8.2% of our labor force of 74 million people, meaning that about 6 million Nigerians were unemployed in June 2015. By September 2017 last year, despite such efforts as N-Power and a range of policies aimed at improving enterprise development and facilitating job creation, the unemployment rate had risen to 18.8% of labor force of 85.1 million people, indicating that between 2015 and 2017, the number of unemployed Nigerians rose from about 66 million to almost 16 million people. On diversification, despite ongoing efforts, reports indicate that oil continues to significantly dominate Nigeria's export revenue, leading to the shortfall in foreign currency in the first half of this administration. In essence, we have been unable to export much beyond crude, as oil still accounts for over 90% of total exports revenue. Just like crude, our economy is very crude. The ineffectiveness of the anti-corruption war is seen in the loss of crucial corruption cases. For instance, in April 2017, the federal government lost 4 high-profile corruption cases involving Orubebe, Ademola, Madam Patience. 4 high-profile corruption in 96 hours. These losses are in addition to bizarre developments such as the failure of the government to confirm a substantive chairman for the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, despite the fact that the same political party controls the executive and the legislature, not to mention the public showdown, shall I call it street fight, between EFCC and Department of State Services officials, or the opposition of the Director General of the DSS to the confirmation of the acting chairman of the EFCC. Furthermore, nothing indicts the current government greater than its failure in one key performance area that ought to be its strength: security. Despite recent setbacks, we acknowledge the gains in the war against Boko Haram, but highly disturbing is the mayhem being continually unleashed by herdsmen on communities in different states across the country, including Benue, Taraba, Plateau, Adamawa, Kaduna, Enugu, Edo, and Ogun states, leaving trails of weeping and wailing. Is Nigeria in another civil war? This government will have to answer. The recent killings in Benue state are akin to the last straw that is set to break the camel's back. Herdsmen attacks and the deliberate civil silence of the Nigerian state. Not only has the government failed to stop these killings across the country, it has done so against the backdrop of conspiratorial silence, choosing rather to label such attacks as an issue of communal misunderstanding, as the Inspector General of Police recently did in respect of the Benue attacks. It has treated the menace with kids' gloves, even after the Global Tourism Index 2015 described militant herdsmen as the 4th most deadly group of 2014. Worse still, some of these killings have reportedly been carried out in collusion with the military. Recently, the secretary to the Adamawa state government, Umar Bindir, justified the bearing of arms by the herdsmen, but failed to tell Nigerians where the herdsmen get their guns from and with which government agency these guns are registered. Who authorized them to bear arms? Who gave them immunity against Section 3 of the Robbery and Firearms Special Provisions Act 1990, which prescribes punishment for illegal possession of arms? Who monitors the use of these guns? Why have the relevant government agencies failed to act? In particular, why has the name Department of State Service, DSS, become synonymous with the phrase deliberate sinful silence? Or is it now the Department of Sinful Silence? As expected, due to the incapacity of the state, not even the anti-grazing laws of states like Benue have succeeded in dealing with these issues. These one-sided and incomprehensive legislations by state governments that lack the constitutional powers to provide security for their people have yielded no result, little or no results. Therefore, the federal government has become complicit for the following 4 reasons. Reason number 1, by not advancing and vigorously executing policies aimed at preempting or preventing these killings, even with sufficient warnings. I'm reminded of the open letter to President Muhammadu Buhari by a former Nigerian High Commissioner to Canada. And the Second Republic Senator, Professor Iromuwase Haga, permit me to quote excerpts from that letter. He wrote, "Your Excellency, Mr. President, I am pained that you ignore my advice in my private memorandum to you dated July 2016, 30th July. I had warned you of the possibility of a horrendous genocide in Benue, Plateau, Taraba, Southern Kaduna, and Southern Adamawa states. I asked you to be proactive and stop the genocide that has been ongoing, but which will burst out in the open and shock the world within 18 months. Your office replied my letter thanking me immensely and giving me the assurances that the advice will be heeded. I regret to now inform you that it is 17 months since my warning and prediction, and your government did nothing to preempt or prevent the genocide." Number 2, the federal government has become complicit by failing to make it an issue of importance in national discourse. Despite the antecedents of the marauders, including the recent Adamawa incident, Mr. President, in his New Year address to the nation, did not consider the menace or the pain of victims of previous attacks worth a mention in his address. Number 3, the federal government has become complicit by failing to give victims a path to reconciliation and the hope of a united Nigeria. It has been reported, for instance, that as a result of the failure of government to act, there have been reprisal attacks on herdsmen, resulting in a vicious cycle of death and destruction. Number 4, the federal government has become complicit by rejecting the call to restructure our nation in order to bring lasting solutions to these and other signs of sectional discontent. In his New Year address, Mr. President further alienated his government from the voice of reason. In relation to the call to restructure Nigeria, in his words, he said, "I have kept a close watch on the ongoing debate about restructuring. When all the aggregates of nationwide opinions are considered, my firm view is that our problems are more to do with process than structure." I totally agree with Mr. President that we need process reforms. Otherwise, we will not be appointing dead men to head parastatals. But can process reforms replace foundational structural reforms? No, never! Be that as it may, let no one confuse the genuine call to restructure the nation with the gimmicks of political opportunists who ride on the restructuring wave for their perceived advantage. Many of them talk the talk, but neither walk the talk in the past, nor will do so in the future. Therefore, I say to those who have the power to take the decisions and actions necessary to end these atrocities, especially by restructuring the nation, but have failed to do so for political gains, that they are attempting to establish a city by iniquity, and there are dire consequences. I'm reminded of the word of the Lord in the book of Habakkuk. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the timbers will answer it. Woe to him who builds a town with bloodshed, who establishes a city by iniquity. The current edifice of state has become a death trap. All around are cracks on the wall that originate from the structural foundations. Those cracks are dripping with blood, and the stones in the wall are crying out. The stones are crying out from Benue State and every part of the country where herdsmen have slaughtered the innocent in unspeakably primitive and most barbaric attacks, while the government failed to act until there were yet more bodies in morgues. The stones are crying out in every state in the Federation, where workers' salaries are unpaid and poverty prevails because states are nothing but institutional and constitutional vegetables on life support from Abuja. The stones are crying out because young men and women are leaving the shores of a country so rich, yet so poor, and are enslaved, prostituted, and murdered in other lands. By maintaining the status quo, Nigeria has once again become a land filled with the crimes of blood. Therefore, since the state legislation has proved inadequate and the federal government has failed to act, the cries of Nigerians have gone up to God as an appeal to a higher governmental order. The judgment that is written in Ezekiel 7:23-27 is about to be executed. Like a time bomb, listen to the word of God. He reads, and I quote, "Make a chain, for the land is filled with crimes of blood, and the city is full of violence. Therefore, I will bring the worst of the Gentiles, and they will possess their houses. I will cause the pomp of the strong to cease, and their holy places shall be defiled. Destruction comes, they will seek peace, but there shall be none. Disaster will come upon disaster, and rumor will come upon rumor, will be upon rumor. Then they will seek a vision from a prophet, but the Lord will perish from the priest, and counsel from the elders. The king will mourn, the prince will be clothed with desolation, and the hands of the common people will tremble. I will do to them according to their way, and according to what they deserve, I will judge them. Then they shall know that I am the Lord." The Nigerian state has a choice to make on the way forward to lasting peace and prosperity. It's either the path of divine judgment, reminiscent of a Jehu revolution, or a choice to renegotiate our union through a pragmatic approach to restructuring the nation. I will devote the last part of this address to reiterating the latter option, hinging it on an interesting statement made by Mr. President in his New Year address. He mentioned, he stated about the impatience and the expectations of Nigerians. But first, I will read excerpts from the 2018 New Year address by Chinese President Xi Jinping, the country we run to bail us out, that showed the heart of a leader mindful of his people. Listen to the president of China. He said, and I quote, "Our GDP rose to the level of 80 trillion yuan, that is $12.3 trillion US dollars. Over 13 million urban and rural jobs were created. 1.35 billion people are covered by basic medical insurance. More than 10 million rural residents were lifted out of poverty. Our country's great development has been achieved by the people, and its fruits should be shared by the people. Officials at all levels must constantly hold in their hearts the interests and concerns of the people, and regard the benefit of the people as their highest career accomplishment. They must think for the people, respond to their needs, and work for the greater happiness of the people." By contrast, in his New Year address to Nigerians, President Buhari said, "We Nigerians can be very impatient and want to improve our conditions faster than may be possible considering our resources and capabilities. We must give a long period of trial and improvement before the system we have adopted is anywhere near fit for purpose. Admittedly, this administration inherited a backlog of woes, including economic recession, an unfavorable external environment characterized by low crude oil prices, and a treasury emptied through corruption by previous administrations. Also, one cannot but agree with President Buhari on the long-term nature of the desired change. After all, China began its journey to economic transformation in 1978. However, the fact remains that over the years, Nigerians have been known to be resilient to a fault and to have low expectations from their government. But if Nigerians are now getting impatient, Mr. President, it could be because they are beginning to realize that fast-paced growth is possible when we get the fundamentals right. In those fundamentals lie the solution to herdsmen attacks and our myriad economic and socio-political problems. It's a call to return to the foundations of our geopolitical structure. It's a call to renegotiate our union, facilitating Nigerians' economic miracle, revisiting the pragmatic approach to restructuring. Nigeria's past episodes of oil-induced growth have never been sustained. Not even when we had a GDP growth of 33.7% in 2004, after oil prices rose in response to the American invasion of Iraq. However, as of 1963, when Nigeria had not yet discovered its oil, we had the opportunity to build a fast-paced but sustainably growing economy. At that time, the Nigerian economy had begun to grow at about the same growth rate by which Japan would later become the second largest economy in the world within 2 decades. By 1962, official reports indicated a rapid rate of economic growth across Nigeria. However, while Japan's growth continued, ours was truncated by political recklessness and military intervention. This led to the abrogation of the regional federal structure that nurtured that growth. Fellow Nigerians, this is why I stand and will keep on standing on the God-inspired pathway to the new Nigeria, which I call the pragmatic steps to restructuring Nigeria. I stand on this because it's a return to the winning formula, albeit improved upon and better suited. With this plan, Nigeria can leapfrog within 10 years the phases of industrialization to become a global industrial powerhouse comprised of 6 geo-economic zones. With this plan, the North Central can optimize its mechanized agricultural potential and harness the Niger and the Benue, not just for irrigation, but also for hydroponic farming. It can become a center of world-class cattle ranching that will not just quell the menace of herdsmen attacks, but also incubate allied opportunities such as meat, milk, and leather processing, and a range of fast-moving consumer goods industries powered by renewable energy. The zone can then transit to heavy industries, including steel manufacturing and auto manufacturing, while also harnessing the rivers and inland waterways and tourist attractions. Meanwhile, that's all right. Meanwhile, the Northwest can harness its vast arable land by deploying land-enhancing technologies for mechanized agriculture and cattle ranching, while also becoming Africa's defense manufacturing hub. With this arrangement, the zone will then be provided sufficient competitive impetus to revive historical potential as a central hub in Africa's textile industry. All the textile factories and industries are now dead. With this approach, the Northeast will have the opportunity to redefine its identity from being a hotbed of Boko Haram to becoming a hub for cattle ranching as well as pharmaceutical and construction industries, harnessing its unique concentration of mineral resources such as clay, limestone, and gypsum. By the way, there's no single state in Nigeria without a mineral resource. Furthermore, with its newfound liberty to develop at its own pace, like they say in my hometown, with its newfound liberty to develop at its own pace, that's what that proverb means. The Southwest can revive the vision of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. The zone will not just resuscitate its vast industrial and agro-allied manufacturer potential, it can become a global center for warehousing and distribution with world-class sea and airports. Its intellectually aware, cosmopolitan social class can become the catalyst of an African cultural renaissance that will facilitate the rise of new genres of creative and cultural industries. Meanwhile, within the zone, Lagos State can consolidate its position as an African hub of global finance. The South-South zone, with its vast oil and gas resources, currently sustains the nation's expenditure. Nigeria holds this region the urgent activation of the pragmatic approach to restructuring. This approach will see the zone progressively obtain autonomy over these resources so that it can house a cluster of refineries and petrochemical industries. In addition, it can recover from its history of environmental degradation to harness its agro-allied industrial potential. It can also incubate a renewable energy cluster and become an African shipping hub. The Southeast is home to a large population of vibrant entrepreneurs. In addition to potentially hosting a globally competitive agro-allied and energy industrial hub, it can once again break records in commerce and industry and export to the world innovation, enterprise, and an energetic human resource ready to convert opportunity anywhere and everywhere in the world in the interest of a nation and continent. With this approach, within 10 years, from a near unitary structure comprising 36 helpless states, these geo-economic zones can then evolve into 6 strong federating geopolitical zones and a federal capital territory roughly mirroring the 7 Emirates of the United Arab Emirates. At this juncture, I will pause to show you a video titled "The Nigeria of My Dreams." Power truly belongs to the people. It is time for the silent majority to instigate real and genuine change. As I've declared on previous occasions, what is required to kickstart this process is the creation of a presidential commission for national reconciliation, reintegration, and restructuring. This commission is to be headed by a biblical Joseph-type national figure, appointed to provide visionary leadership for the process with the support of 6 zonal commissioners. The visionary leadership will coordinate the implementation of master plans for each of the 6 geopolitical economic zones. It will evolve for the nation a strong anti-corruption based national value system and stir up on common patriotic zeal among Nigerians. It will also attract various domestic and foreign investment packages and float a social impact bond to fund development. The requisite human capacity for the economic miracle will be provided not only by skilled Nigerians at home, but also by many others based abroad through diaspora for development agreements guaranteed by goodwill and fueled by uncommon patriotism. To facilitate the process, the National Assembly will provide the requisite constitutional amendments within the 10 years, in addition to serving as a monitoring and evaluation clearinghouse. By the 10th year at the latest, the systems, values, and structural underlay of the geo-economic transformation will be codified in a new constitutional arrangement whose preamble is the Nigerian Charter for National Reconciliation and Integration adopted by the 2014 National Conference. The new constitution will be adopted by the Nigerian people through a referendum so that it can genuinely lay claim to the prefix, "We the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria." Conclusion. As a nation, we have an opportunity to rewrite our history and choose a more prosperous future. We can choose to continue to play the ostrich, or we can decide to take up the gauntlet and face our national challenges squarely. Just as Moses said to Israel in Deuteronomy 30:19, he reads, and I quote, "I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, that I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both you and your descendants may live." Let it be known, however, that the new Nigeria is like a moving train that cannot be stopped, like a stone that will cause the wicked to stumble, like a rock that will make them fall. And whoever falls on this stone will be broken, but on whomever it falls, it will grind into powder. And this nation will fulfill our destiny. I have said my piece. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear. Nigeria will be saved, Nigeria will be changed, and Nigeria will be great in my lifetime. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.